the best session was from this company, and I love this, that none of us have heard of. That's the beauty of this. So we shouldn't be afraid that, like, oh my God, who are these people? Are they eating my pie? They're not eating your pie. They're making the pie way bigger.
What happens when one of geospatial's most important voices says the future is bigger than geospatial itself?
There's still this debate, is geospatial special?
In this episode, we smash echo chambers, question platforms, and talk Lego-style data stacks.
Why is everybody fascinated with this? This is business 101. Right? So how have we isolated ourselves so much?
Plus, why collaboration is the fastest way to grow the whole field.
Actually, you're enabling a whole new generation of businesses here.
From cloud-native data lakes to generative AI, Nadine lays out how to connect the dots and who should be doing it.
We have this opportunity in time. If we do something more deliberate, we can make the impact that we're dreaming of in 5 years, not in 10 years. And I see this opportunity.
Ready to rethink the map? The future is spatial, so let's jump in. Yeah, Nadine, welcome. I'm really excited to have you on and have your perspective, because you have quite the amazing history in this industry and a depth of knowledge I think definitely I don't have, and I think many others are excited to hear about. But can you just give me an intro into who you are and kind of your background and some of the things you're working on today?
First of all, I'm more excited than you, I think, because I think you're doing great things with geospatial and beyond. So thank you for having me and for this conversation. Who am I? I've been thinking about that recently because a friend of mine was telling me, stop introducing yourself as a geospatial person, because you guys are locking yourself into something that others don't understand when everybody's using. So to me, I think I'm like this multidisciplinary person who's trying to make the world a better place. And that's been happening with using a lot of data. So whether it's at NASA and the Earth observation data, which means geospatial, whether it's in aviation and weather information management and flight management, which is also geospatial. And then whether it's at the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is, you can talk standards and interoperability, but really it's about how do people get together and agree on a common baseline so that people and others can build on top of it. And most recently, let's call it dabbling in how do you create a research institute around what I'm talking about. So it's this intersection of climate and sustainability and the future of infrastructure, and what do we need to support it in terms of data and tools and talent, et cetera, et cetera. Works?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's you've been able to see so many of these different things play out across big organizations, inside of the public sector, outside of the public sector, in academia, all of these different areas, which I think is great. I think what I heard, and I think what the interesting thing I'm going to pull out from your intro is that you're not saying you're a geospatial person, right? And I think what's interesting there is that that can be a tricky term to kind of explain. Like if someone asks me what I do, sometimes I'll say I work with data and technology, right? And then when you get into it, you say like, oh, I work with, data about the earth or, stuff like that. And then eventually someone asks, is it like Google Maps, right? So then eventually you make your way all the way back there, and then you kind of have to start to explain it. But I think what's strange, maybe not strange, but one area that's maybe a challenge for our space is there is this concept of like you're in geo or out of geo, or you're inside of it or outside of it. And there's this bit of this like echo chamber in terms of like a lot of the same concepts being talked about inside the geospatial world that kind of bounce around. And sometimes it's hard to bring in ideas from outside of that. What's your take on that? And like, I mean, I think all of our goals are ultimately to bring this stuff that we're working on to the rest of the world and more people, and help make the world a better place, which is like what we want to do.
Mm.
But how is that serving us, or how is it not serving us?
All right, you're really starting with the difficult questions. um, so I actually, when you say you introduce yourself without saying geospatial, I have two things that come to mind. When I first became the CEO of OGC, so that was like, what, 6 years ago, the chairman, Jeff Harris, at the time, he said, when you join, they start to introduce you to everybody and all of that. He's like, I'm going to challenge you that in every one of these meetings, we're going to go through the whole meeting and you're not going to say the word geospatial once. That's your challenge, right? And I think I'm with you. We sort of created this bubble because there was nothing, and this community created this, and then the world exploded. But we're still this thing that's not totally integrated. And I swear, every event you go to these days, there's still this debate. Is geospatial special? Special is geospatial.
Mm.
So I have this thing recently at a geospatial event. The best session was from this company, and I love this, that none of us have heard of. That's the beauty of this. So we shouldn't be afraid that, like, oh my God, who are these people? Are they eating my pie? They're not eating your pie. They're making the pie way bigger, right? So this person, who I should give him credit, but I don't remember his name. He's a Stanford graduate, stood up and was talking about listening to your customer and what are the problems that we need to solve, and applying your typical design, methodologies all the way back. It was the best talk, and it's like some sort of like an aha moment when you sit and observe. It's like, why is everybody fascinated with this? This is business 101, right? So how have we isolated ourselves so much, right? That we're the geospatial experts, that we sort of like now coming back and combining this expertise with the customer and the user and the competitor and the partnerships. And I think it's just, I keep saying life works in mysterious ways, and this is how the ecosystem is working. This is the time. I think that's why I appreciate, I was telling you earlier, your newsletter and your blogs, because we are at this moment in time. I think maybe if this happened 10 years ago, it would have been forced because people don't see it, don't feel it, haven't experienced it. And can I add one more thing? Because I feel I've seen this before in the aviation industry. So I had this startup in aviation for 5 years. So and our customers, who were the airlines and the ANSPs, so the FAAs of the world, right? Until they became drone companies. And at the time, the observation is this innovation of drones and drone management and all of this, it did not come from the airline industry, so it didn't come from this community. The innovation came from outside, and then it took time to eventually, I don't know right now, I'm not there anymore, but I don't know if they're actually fully won or not yet. But I feel we're having that same moment, I think, in geospatial. We're like, you know what, we're way bigger than geospatial.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of the time there, if you get a bunch of people that have worked with spatial data in a room, right? The
Mm.
conversation tends to go towards a lot of the same things, right? There's maybe you're talking about formats, or you're talking about standards, or you're talking about tools to use, and these types of things. And what's tricky there is that there's so much focus on those topics and discussions, about y- the practice, or the how. I'll just sum it up as that let's say all these businesses, someone kind of comes in the door, you know, and kind of like, you know, you said there's this like gravitational effect of like you want to you want to work with us, and then there's this huge push to kind of go after that, and then you get this kind of strange competition going where there's a lot of people trying to be all those pieces of all those things. When I say people, I mean kind of companies or organizations or anything like that. You know, this concept of like geospatial platforms broadly, I think is kind of what our industry expects, because, you know, well, a geospatial system has data, it has visualization, it has, you know, ETL, it has, you know,
Mm,
there's all these pieces, right? Um, Whereas I think what there's two pieces to pull out of that, and I'm curious your thoughts about that. One is that I think we're likely better off, you know, as an industry, and I think we're actually can increase the size of the pie to, you know, work with more people and get more data out there if we kind of specialize a little bit there, you know, and say, hey, we're really good at this one thing, and when customers come to us because, you know, we're really good at data processing, or we're really
mm,
good at, you know, this type of model, or we're really good at visualization, right? There's all, everyone can, you know, be good at one thing, and then, you know, what I think tends to happen is that you feel like, well, if this falls under the geospatial umbrella, I should be doing that too. And then things start to get muddy. So there's one part about, I think
mm.
we should, you know, to build more partnerships, coalitions, work together from that perspective,
Yes.
especially on the technology side. But then second, I think is exactly what you said, is like, how can, you know, people that are working in the space learn more about their customers? And when I say customers, that could be stakeholders, that could be, you know, citizens, if you're working in the public sector. There's many terms of that definition, but the end consumer of what you're creating, how can
Mm,
they be a little bit more focused and hear that more, to start to say, here's the thing I'm really good at?
yeah. So let me start with the first one, because it's not a new problem. This does the customer need a platform that's end to end? Should the industry be that, or should it be the little pieces, you know, like the Lego, and people can put it together? And I've spent years at OGC and even before. So at Northrop, we used to call it, you know, competimates. You gotta have competimates, right? You have to, because you're not good at everything, and you're an idiot if you think you're good at everything. So um, I think we go back to right. So if it's the Lego thing, and I think again, this is the evolution of geospatial. If it's the Lego thing, and we're making the little pieces, right? We're doing visualization, or we're doing spatial analysis, or we're doing, whatever, just the data, right? um, then are we making it easy for the customer, whatever the customer could be, a system integrator that can combine these two? And I think it's not clear yet, right? There's still a lot of you have to educate yourself, or you have to have somebody on your team who understands. That's why I get excited and I start to share when it's like, oh, QGIS is working with the Carto extension and Wherebot is working. It's like, oh, but it shouldn't be like, oh, right? That's what I keep talking when we're collaborating in geospatial. It's like, oh, he's doing this, let's collaborate. It's not sort of like what I call the deliberate, oh, we can actually create something bigger if we can combine, and then we go after opportunities together,
Mm.
or we pitch, right, something together. Um, and I'll give you an anecdote. Recently, a Wall Street firm, right, who's interested in the ESG indicators, and they were like, okay, we're getting the indicators as I don't know what, like shapefiles, or I really don't know, but like, this is great. We actually don't know how do you bring this into our system? Do I need to hire now somebody? Is it one buddy? And so they were asking me, like, do you know a consulting firm, or what do we do, right? So we haven't gone that far. And honestly, again, Matt, your ecosystem, how you published like the whole it's like the beginning of this, but I don't think we're using it right now as like, oh, you mean I can take this and I can take that, and there aren't enough of these examples. And to be honest, because I've been on the customer side, and it is much easier to buy one platform. It's one contract, right? And I think this is the shift. I've also said it when I was at OGC, but we never got there. A long time ago, this is, there was this concept of system integrator, right? And you know who they are: Leidos, Northrop, SAIC, right? Who are these people now? Because the tool set has changed, right? I think the scale of things has changed. So, again, it's not like on the top of your head you say, oh, here are the 3 system integrators in geospatial, blah, 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 blah. But maybe this is an opportunity. I think that's what we're trying to build with learning from 20 years. So without recreating the Lidos and the BAEs of the world, because we're saying we can lower the barrier with cloud, with AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, there's a big. I mean, I'm definitely I'm pretty knees deep in the cloud native space and the cloud native geospatial, which is it's kind of trying to solve that from the format level, And I think if we can, be more effective about putting data in places where everyone can get access to it, and understand that a broad set of people will want to ask spatial questions, and they probably understand that the core of some basic fundamentals of how I want to interact with spatial data. That pie is much bigger than trying to kind of keep this internal kind of structuring about who can be the platform, right, and go from that. But there, you're 100% right around being able to create a vision of like a systems integrator, right? Understanding how all these pieces fit together. And it's strange because I've seen, I've been on the side where I've seen the big, kind of players go and recommend all these different things. And then at the same time, I take my cues from like the modern data space there's amazing kind of videos on YouTube. And like, if you're ever interested in like the modern data stack, there's this guy named the Seattle data guy who just kind of talks about, here's how I see the real world of data teams playing out, and all these different pieces. And you can get this information, in many different ways. So what's really cool to me right now is that I think we're getting very close to a space where we can get more data and geospatial data out in the hands of other people. That might feel potentially scary because it's like, oh, we're giving away our value, right? Like our value is the knowledge to work with this data and things like that. But I'm curious about your take on that, because I've heard a parallel of these like big industry shifts. One was when Excel came out, like the spreadsheet software, and everyone thought like the accounting people, there were going to be no more accountants, right? Like Excel can do it all. It's a software, it can handle all these things. It almost feels like when we turn the data over to everyone else, like we lose our value or something like that. And I think that's actually like very much the opposite. And that's what happened with Excel, is that actually there's more accountants and more data folks now than ever. So what's your perspective on, if we can bring the data out to more organizations? Number one, how should people start to approach that? Who have you seen do that, and kind of what do you think that means for the geospatial space as a whole?
Yeah. I'll give you an example because it's easier than answering the big question. It's a very tough question again. Overture maps. And I mentioned them specifically because yesterday we hosted a GeoAI working group, right? And it was about Gen AI and geospatial. What are the entrepreneurs doing with this? And I love this. Again, it's not people that we know. I mean, we know some of them, but others were like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I'm going to say at least 3 of the demos or the ideas were based off of overture maps. And I know there's, OpenStreetMaps has been around, for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just giving an example. Like, actually, it's not just, and I think that's been our problem so far. We say, here's data. Good luck to you all. Figure it out. Metadata, not metadata, right? It's like, I mean, I worked at NASA. It's just like, here it is, not CDF. Good luck to you. right? So, and I think this is part of the shift. The whole, between the cloud native making it accessible, but also making it usable, but also this focus on, it's not just here's data, good luck to you, right? Here's data that we worked on together that you can, link back, that you can use. And I think, to me, this was a great example because these people were not using, in this case, Overture Map because they know somebody, or no, they were looking for data and they found data that they can use, which is a great example of, actually, you're enabling a whole new generation of businesses here that are solving problems for people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paid to do this work. And I think this concept is nothing new, right? When I go back to my aviation example, our whole thing in aviation at the time was making the data accessible, right? At the time, it was XML, and then it became JSON with APIs. And we were like, why? Because right now it's locked. Only the aviation people, and my God, you had to be in aviation, like air traffic control deep, to be able to penetrate these systems and understand. And then you make it accessible via an API, right? And some JSON, and look what people can do with it. Yeah, so I honestly, I think it's proven. I don't think we've written maybe that use case for geospatial yet, although like the Landsat, isn't that a great example? But maybe that's too big and it's one data set, and we need to say more about, all these little things that add up to a bigger thing.
Yeah. I think that there's this huge opportunity to, number one, I think if you're looking for the next big opportunity in geospatial, if you can figure out what pieces you want to do really well and be a player that brings that data out to more people,
Mm,
right? And makes it accessible in all the other systems that are being used. I think it kind of feels counterintuitive because you're like, in the way we've been taught of
mm,
spatial is this unique thing. It needs to be treated differently, right? And really, I think that it's, if I'm also of the belief at the same time that if more people got their hands on this data and used it, the world will be a better place, and we can help to understand these different problems. So it's much more about, we're not treating it, I feel like we're kind of like treating it with kids gloves, like, oh, it's this special thing over here. Let's get it out in the wild and see what happens, and you never know what's going to happen. So if you can figure out what pieces you do really well there, be that, via product, be a,
mm,
via creating insights, be that focusing on one industry or vertical, or being a platform of, just picking one friction point and focusing in on that. All those things can be
yeah,
really good. And that's what I've been really starting to see, is that a lot of companies are, starting to specialize and do these different things really, really well. So that helps to break this kind of siloing
yeah,
effect of like, our data lives over here, your data lives over there. And we'll, if
yeah.
they need to talk to each other, we'll figure that out, which is, I am hopeful about that. And I think that can start to grow from there. On the same topic of silos, when things start to get kind of in these different spaces, I know, one thing you've mentioned to me before is kind of on silos inside of the academic circles as well. Trying to, there's these spaces where, different ideas or concepts might get kind of stuck inside different places and things like that. Can you talk to me a little bit
Mm.
more about that? Because that's one area, certainly I'm on the industry side more than the academic side. How do you see that play on the academic side of things?
Um, I think I will define it as a huge missed opportunity, right? I've been interacting more with academia recently, and it's two things, right? And they're both frustrating to me because I'm more, the efficient, how can we get things, going instead of, um, anyways, I'm trying to say it in a diplomatic way, right? I think there were two problems that I'm seeing. One, the silos. I go back our GeoAI session, right? And it's like a whole series, right, of GeoAI where we're like getting, to be honest with you, the best of the best in industry to talk about what they're doing, not in AI, right? Not in geo AI. It was like generative geo AI, right? Just like this is the future, all right? How many academics, even though we shared with an academic list, right? How many do you think actually attended or listened? Silos of the world. Oh no, this is interesting. Oh, go to conferences, go to any of these conferences, right? The academics have their own conferences, and then the rest of us somehow have our own conferences, which becomes government and industry. And sometimes we invite, right, the academic leaders, right? But what I've also observed that these academic leaders are actually not representative of the whole academic landscape, not even within their own organization. So long story, there's this like, why aren't you coming and learning? I mean, maybe in the past, in academic research, they were doing really different things out there, and industry was solving today's problems. But when I look at AI specifically, we are talking about the exact same thing. There is no separation. Oh, like, this is a research problem. This is the so why is this gap? So that's one thing that I'm like, seriously. I was this morning sending an email saying I don't understand why we didn't have hundreds of people, right, from academia just wanting to listen to somebody like Sean Gorman actually say how he used overture math with augmented reality. This is just like, it's not research, right? Anyway, so I have this like, I need to do something about this. We need to do something about this. And then the other side is you talk to the academics. And again, now that I'm like a little bit in that world, they have their own workshops on digital twins that they've invite their own circles, right? We don't know. Same thing. We don't know about it until the paper is published. I mean, there are some few stars that are sharing, but not enough, not nearly enough, right? And at the same time, we're still stuck into, okay, this is research. Who is taking this research to commercialization? It's a huge missed opportunity. So we know some people who are doing it, it's like at a tiny little scale. So that I wish I had an answer. It's like, well, what can we do? I think other than we need to be deliberate at connecting these communities. But I haven't found how I can convince the academic community, because I keep getting the answer about just like, you don't understand how this works. This is the culture, all of that. Like, we're not driven by the deadlines and et cetera, which I do understand, but there is an opportunity here. I'm not saying we don't have to change everything, but at this moment in time, when we're talking about the exact same problems, shouldn't we have programs that are designed to bridge these two worlds? Not fake check the box, right? I got a letter from industry, they're interested. No, to actually roll our sleeves together and try to do something.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I was literally yesterday, I was telling you, I was at the University of
Yes.
Tennessee in Knoxville. Dr. Keishing would invited me down. I gave a talk, and whenever I go to like university, I feel like, I'm like the least like qualified person to be in that room, because there's people that are doing PhDs, masters. I have my undergrad, and like, that's as far as I've gone. So, like, and it's strange because at the same time, everyone there is just as curious to hear like what I'm seeing on the, quote unquote, the other side. And like, if we didn't have that like other side, but credit to Dr. Wu, because he's put so much out there, in terms of sharing what he's doing and just being very open about it. There's no, I think that's, if I was to say here's some ways to solve that, just sharing that, publishing and writing a paper, is great. And you can also share insights as simple on LinkedIn and YouTube to get that information out there and share it with more people, right?
Yeah.
There's just even that can help share those conversations. And I mean, that's how, like, I've the connections I've made, the things I've learned from just doing that, and kind of like what I would call working in public, has been
Mm,
amazing. So if you are hearing this and you're on the academic side, and work in public, share what you're doing, be open, and discuss it. And I think that that's one huge piece. And credit to the event that I was at was all about open science, and how do we exactly as Colin, like, share and
yeah,
collaborate, learn from each other on the other side. And it was cool just kind of being in that space for a little while, because everybody I talked to kind of all had similar challenges, which was, getting our data, making it more accessible, and it was all
yeah.
from all other side, all different places. So I think, that it's super hard, because you have these kind of, you know, these things that feel like, these traditional kind of, academic steps and things that you can go through, but inviting collaboration, and I think just sharing more is a big step forward. And then taking that out to, okay, how do you take these things that you're working on and bring them into, you know, uh, industry or business or whatever that is. I think it's definitely been done. If you look at, some of the, on in the world I'm in today, Apache Spark was, I think, started at UC Berkeley, and then, is now formed into a big company. Same thing we're doing at Whereabouts was,
Yeah.
our two founders were building that at ASU, and then bring that out into, into the company, and just from hearing people and what they're trying to do with it. So there's definitely ways to do it. And I think more and more that if we could just talk, and I say, I don't be scared, for anyone out here. Don't be scared to share what
Mm.
you're working on. That can be a huge step forward, just in terms of having those conversations.
So when you say it like this, because I've been wondering, I was at the UN, what was it, back in August, because it was all about the changing geospatial ecosystem and the role of government and national mapping agencies. So again, this is all part, we're not, you know, we're not picking, but I think this podcast is going to be, it's almost like, what needs to be changed to become a whole, efficient, sustainable, growing ecosystem for geospatial. And what I said then, it clicked with me when you were talking. I felt like we are doing amazing things, and we have amazing communities everywhere. I mean, geospatial people are the best, but we throw things at the wall, right? And some things stick and some things work together. So we're letting almost like the momentum of the industry just take us there, versus what you said. It's like, yeah, we can talk and we can collaborate, but what kind of initiatives, right, or programs could we actually put together so that it's not this random and individual and small scale thing, but actually it is a coordinated, and then maybe it's a missed opportunity with open science, that because it is a program, but I don't know what we've truly done to actually make it part of what we do, everybody. So I think there is, now we have two opportunities. There was this opportunity of, what is the system integrator of today and how do you navigate the data and the tools? And then there is what kind of initiatives we can scope and get funding for, right? To bridge these worlds intentionally and not artificially, and not just like, yeah, here's a workshop. There's a gazillion of these things. What is it, right?
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think finding some ways to proactively start to build
Mm,
those connections, because I mean, a lot of them are, I mean, what's great about it is it's grassroots. It's just kind of happening, right? And
yeah,
that's an exciting thing to see happen. At the same time, now that we know that, what structure needs to be put in place, and I certainly don't have that answer, but
yeah.
I think it's definitely something that, I think we should start to explore a little bit, and start to build upon. And to transition the topic, I think you also mentioned you were just a part of another kind of workshop about preparing the future leadership, in
Mm,
geospatial, right? And I think, like, as these are the big questions we have to answer, interoperability and collaboration with, outside of geospatial. How do we start to, kind of organize as an industry and start to work together instead of kind of playing in the same sandbox we have for years? And then how do we start to build these collaborations between the amazing thinking that's happening inside of universities and the amazing work that's happening inside of government and the amazing work that's happening inside of industry? What does that mean for, the next, kind of generation of folks that are trying to, really, break into this space?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are thinking about this, right? From strictly how do you find a job to how do you look for somebody. So this event I was talking about was next generation sustainability. I'm reading here, advancing the future with geospatial intelligence, right? But it was primarily about sustainability. So if sustainability is one of the core drivers right now, right? So how do we prepare this next generation? And this is why, schools like Columbia now have a climate school. There are now programs on these things. I'm taking my son on tours of colleges right now, and I'm like blown away. But you can do like business and climate or business and sustainability, just like you can do business and finance. I mean, it's just like fascinating. But what I actually it goes back to me to one awareness. So I always use some examples like cesium, right? Because I'm a big fan of what they're doing. Again, the technical stuff is great, but the bridging of the worlds that they're doing, right? That they've introduced us to the gaming community and vice versa. And recently with the Olympic stuff, right? It's like, look, the whole Olympic thing was a geospatial tool. Do you understand how cool this is, right? And to me, that's the leadership of the future. It's like we're not starting from geospatial and thinking what these people could be. It's what are the opportunities out there where you can use this mix and match of skills. I always use segment anything, right? Because it's also Dr. Wu. This example of this is to me the next generation. Ooh, Meta released something, or these days OpenAI released something, right? How can I use it to track a tornado or to do some spatial analysis, right? So to me, the generation of the future is we need to train them somehow on how do you connect the dots. It's back to our original conversation, right? Dots in geospatial and outside of geospatial, dots between data and the problems, dots between the customer and the data, dots between the partners that can build a bigger solution. So there's this, if everything is more or less there, right? So the leaders are the ones that can do the smart mixing and matching to create a solution that actually works. So I had something about connecting the dots and tailoring, right? This is your example about Excel. Yes, we have all these things, right? But who's building the dashboard for you? For you, not my neighbor, not my friend, but you, right? That's tailoring. That's a skill because you really need to understand. I was in a call recently with a customer looking for crowd management solution for their whole, what is it, city, town, something. And it was outside the US, so you got the language issues as well, right? And this guy was saying, I got 100 crowd management solutions that were pitched to me, right? But none of them work for me. So this is when you go back. This is the future when we talk about, to me, knowing all of this, educate yourselves on the new technologies and the existing ones, because that's another problem in aviation that we encountered. You had the drone community of innovators. They were from Silicon Valley, and all of a sudden they were like defining latitude, longitude, and bounding. It was like, no, there is a pathway. It's not the future versus the past. It's not the future versus the legacy. No, it's all one ecosystem. We all are going together, right?
Yeah.
So that's a long way of answering your question. I'll add one more thing because I'm passionate about it and I don't see it enough. When we talk about geospatial, it's not just the data tools, blah blah blah, the ethics, the ethics, the ethics, right? So I'm a fan of the locus charter, even though it's just a charter, right? It doesn't force anything. Now we're talking about law and policy. So you talk about opportunities in this domain. Just in this podcast, you could go whichever direction and actually make an impact because there are all these gaps.
I think that's the big. I really like that there's a message around, you don't come into geospatial just to get into geospatial. Come in with the things that you care about and the problems you see, and then use that knowledge to apply, spatial thinking and spatial technologies to that. And I've seen that. I mean, it's I met some folks. I did an event, I think it was, last summer, with Justice at Space Capital. Their office is here in New York, and there were people coming from all different places and backgrounds. Two folks had just started kind of a map-based application. I mean, there's an energy when you see someone like that come in. I think it's called the Pursuit app, which is like, this kind of social experience that allows you to share and populate information about places, of course, and things, and almost like what the original Foursquare was way back in the day, when you could check in and stuff like that. But it was a newer take on that, and just something that, like, they're coming in with this perspective, and hey, the map just happened to fit the case, right? The geospatial component of it just happened to fit what we're trying to solve. And I think if you that type of energy and that type of thinking is like really great. And some of the most successful, and I think some of the most innovative companies are coming from that outside perspective. Placer AI is a really great example, where they're, these are folks that came kind of from outside of spatial. They're from commercial real estate, and they're bringing spatial data into that ecosystem. And they, from all accounts, they're doing really great. So, and like I said, the traditional thing is, you're taking a part of my pie that I could be having, and taking it out there. Well, actually, they're opening it up to a much larger world. And the more that folks in these other spaces can see the value of that, it opens up those things to others. So applying that type of thinking about these other problems that need that. And it's always tough, because my head's always in this space, and like, I think like that's that's what I'd like to invite, is to hear what are your big ideas, and use that. And everything we talked about, from breaking down academic silos to increasing collaboration, and kind of breaking the echo chamber. All, if we can do more of those things in our space, I think we'll see a lot more increased success. And it's cool to hear your thinking on these topics, and then how you can apply all these different pieces to that, because you talk to and meet a much bigger segment of individuals than I do in my day to day. So it's fun to hear. Any last thoughts on kind of what people should be thinking about, and kind of how they can start to apply this thinking?
My last thought is I'm very excited about the future. I find myself that I can't keep up anymore. There's actually a lot of good things that are happening, and it's on all fronts. AI alone, right? It's like, how do you keep up with everything that's happening there? But I get excited about the opportunities, right? Because our skills, our community. So maybe it's not an industry. I don't know what to call it, but this community of, mostly they're passionate, because why else would you get into this this thing, right? So there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of knowledge, and there's a lot of emphasis on just building, honestly, platforms for others, or resources, don't call them platforms, resources for others, that I'm seeing, that I think we're getting in the right direction. My only plea is, it's not just the natural momentum, we'll get there. We have this opportunity in time. If we do something more deliberate, we can make the impact that we're dreaming of in 5 years, not in 10 years. And I see this opportunity.
Yeah, we're at an interesting time, and I think there's,
Yeah.
the energy, the ideas, it's really starting to lead to something bigger, which is the fun part about being this. And it's I've seen, this type of energy a few times before when, we're starting to bring GIS onto the web. I think we're at that place again
Yeah.
to see where we can start to go. So, Nadine, thank you so much, for taking time. I know you have a extremely busy schedule, so thanks for grabbing some time to talk with me. And then, it's always amazing to hear your ideas. Uh, any ways that, any kind of leaving thoughts for people to get involved and some of the things that you're doing, or
I have tried, I don't know, it's an experiment. I started this LinkedIn group where it's called the Geospatial Tech and Research Hub. You'll find it. But it's for me, I'm trying to dump in there all the cool things that I'm seeing. It's like, ooh, right? And I would say maybe this is one of the many, many ways, right? And this is low cost for us to just be on the same page, in this case, literally, as a community. So I would encourage people to get engaged that way.
awesome. Nadine, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much. Keep doing the amazing work you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.